It's 7 o'clock, so let's get started. First, I would like to welcome you to the Huntington District Community Conversation on active transportation in Fairfax County. Let me advise you that the meeting is being recorded and the recording has now started. I would also like to introduce Lauren Delmar, who is with FCDOT, the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, supporting this effort from the technology perspective. She's going to read your question and answers and your chat. My name is Nicole Winans with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation as well. I'm the project manager for the ActiveFairfax Transportation Plan and will be leading this meeting. I would also like to welcome Supervisor Walter Alcorn. Thank you for joining us. Would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you very much, Nicole. Yeah, just very briefly, I'm really looking forward to tonight's event and looking forward to the conversation. I think that's a really good way of putting it and exactly what we need. We have a lot of activity going on now relating to active transportation, and certainly with the planning process that's underway, but such an important consideration is really getting feedback and having the conversation with folks in the public to get a better idea of what should the focus in some areas be, what's most important to some members of the community. So thank you again for doing this, and I look forward to hearing from folks tonight.
Thank you very much. All right, let's get first slide started. All right, so the agenda for the meeting tonight is we're going to look at some of the meeting logistics, since it's a virtual meeting due to the pandemic. So you will be able to speak or type question in the Q&A or in the chat. So we will go over that in a second. Then we're going to start out looking at what is active transportation, since it's an active transportation plan. And what are active transportation facilities, because there are many different ones. So we want to make sure we go over what those actually look like and what opportunities we have to build the active transportation network in Fairfax County using those different type of facilities. At the end of that, so that part is split into facilities for pedestrians, facilities for cyclists, and hiking and mountain biking and equestrian facilities. And at the end of each of those modes, for example, if once we finish talking about pedestrian facilities, there will be a chance for you all to chime in about, what is your experience as a pedestrian in Fairfax County? And we will have 10 minutes to go over that and have a discussion and hear your thoughts. And we will do that for the other modes. And then we will look at what is this project about and where are we going in the future in Fairfax County for active transportation. And then at the end of the meeting, there will be another chance to ask questions about the project or active transportation in general, or share anything you would like to share with the project team before we end the meeting for today. So let's get started with the meeting logistics. Again, this meeting is recorded, and the recording will be available on the project website, which can be found at fairfaxcounty.gov/transportation/bike-walk/ActiveFairfax. If you would like to ask a question anytime during the meeting, you can use the Webex Qa feature, which is at the bottom right. And to do that, you just open the window and type in your question, and we will read the question during the discussion section throughout the meeting. If you would like to answer a question that we are asking, please use the chat feature because that will allow you to see each other's comments. The Q&A feature, you will not see any questions that are being asked. We will need to answer those verbally. So that's why we would like to use a chat feature during those times when we would like to have a conversation. But if you would like to speak verbally, you're welcome to do that. In order to do that, if you're using a computer, there's a little hand symbol on the bottom right of your screen. You can press that to raise your hand, press it again to unraise your hand. If you're calling in today and you're on the phone, you can't see the screen, please press *3 to raise your hand, and you can press *3 again to take your hand down. All right, so let's get started with, what is active transportation? It's a little bit of a clunky term, but what it basically means is, it's all sorts of transportation that's non-motorized, mostly self-propelled travel that could be for recreational or transportation purposes. And examples would be walking or riding a bike, riding a horse, hiking, running, rolling, and rolling would include, being in a wheelchair or using a scooter or being pushed in a stroller. And that definition does exclude, doesn't exclude these new modes that are becoming more popular, which are called electric micromobility vehicles. And that can include electric scooters that you may have seen around Reston or around DC or Arlington, electric bikes, and electric skateboards. And what are active transportation facilities? So again, we're going to look at the modes separately. So the first mode is the pedestrian facilities, and we're looking at bicycle facilities, and last we're going to look at hiking, mountain biking, equestrian facilities. So pedestrian facilities that you're all familiar with, of course, are sidewalks. So that's the most basic pedestrian facility, and in urban areas, they tend to be a little bit wider to allow for greater amount of people walking and not bumping into each other, allowed for social strolling and gathering and lingering. And often in those urban areas, there are also street trees and lighting and benches. In more suburban areas, in rural areas, you will likely see a narrow sidewalk. And that sidewalk is usually about 5 feet wide, and that's the required width to meet the needs of wheelchair users. And sometimes there's street lighting, sometimes there's trees, but often these projects are built without street trees and without sidewalk lighting. Next up, what's a crosswalk? And that's not that easy of a question. So we want to make sure that we go over the different type of crosswalks that we have in Fairfax County. So if you look at the graphic here on the left, you can see where the one labels a very common crosswalk, which you often see at signals. So these are the two wide parallel lines. Then we also have something that's called a high visibility crosswalk, or also known as a zebra crosswalk. The number 2 here, it's a big bold stripes. You see those near schools or metro station predominantly. But then there's also another crosswalk, and that's the number 3 here. It's called an unmarked crosswalk. It's legally still a crosswalk. People are expected to cross here at an intersection, but it doesn't have to actually be marked. A different type of crosswalk is one that's not at an intersection. It's called a mid-block crosswalk. So you can see there's no street coming in and it's just in the middle. There's maybe a trail crossing here or a popular destination on one side that would encourage people to cross. So then we have often a high visibility crosswalk to alert drivers that pedestrians are supposed to cross here with some signage. We also have enhanced crosswalks more and more in Fairfax County. On the left here, you see a crosswalk that's enhanced with a pedestrian refuge island that gives people a place to wait, and then they can cross one direction of traffic at a time. So that significantly enhances the safety of this type of crossing. On the right here, there is a new technology installed, which is called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or short RFB. And those are lights that come with a push button, and it activates a flashing strobe light that's highly visible to alert drivers that pedestrians are crossing. And those are particularly efficient at night to alert drivers that someone is in the road, because sometimes with lighting, it's hard to see. And then we have signalized crosswalk that you probably all have used, the one on the left at a busy intersection where it's signalized for the cars as well. There's a push button, sometimes a countdown signal, and pedestrians have a protected phase that they can cross, with the exception of a right-turning vehicle that would need to yield to these pedestrians crossing. On the right here is a newer type of signal that's usually only used away from an intersection. So this cannot be used at an intersection. It's called the pedestrian hybrid beacon. It's for those busy mid-block crosswalks that need that extra protection. And those actually stop traffic. So unlike the rapid flashing beacon, where the pedestrian still has to yield to cars, shouldn't step in the road, this signal actually functions more like a signalized crosswalk at an intersection. And we have grade separated crossings, which are the pedestrian bridges here on the left, and very common in Reston, the pedestrian tunnels, which are often used for as part of a trail system. So now we would like to hear from you about what is it like to be a pedestrian in the Hunter Mill district. Tell us, any issues you're facing or anything you enjoy. So this is a completely open discussion. So if you would like to participate, please use the chat or raise your hand if you would like to speak. And if you're on the phone, please press *3 to raise your hand.
Thanks, Nicole. We just opened up the chat and we have a first hand raised from Miss Quinn. And I'm going to unmute you.
Sorry. Hi, this is Fionnuala Quinn. I live in Reston. Thanks very much, Nicole and everybody, for your work on this project. And I want to jump straight in on the topic of maintenance and how that works, particularly in our situation, in our county, the way our roads work. And in order to have a network that's functional, first we have to build the network and fill in the pieces, but then for the network that we have, it has to be functional on a day-to-day basis. And the nature of our pedestrian network is such that we're incredibly dependent on it being functional, because oftentimes we may only have sidewalk on one side of the street. So that means if it's out, we have a particular problem because we don't have a backup. We don't have that extra piece resilience in the system that'll allow us to walk up the other side of the street. So if there's a severe problem on one side, or it's blocked by a vehicle or something like that, we're being forced into very undesirable situations. So we're uniquely dependent on maintenance. And then we have a system where we have ownership that's under all different agencies. And as a pedestrian walking down the street, you have no way of knowing whose jurisdiction you need to complain to. So actually what I want to specifically talk about is the system for reporting maintenance issues. In my experience, the agencies will come out and fix the issue, but you first have to wade through a system that's very difficult. Number one, you don't know if you're complaining to the right person. You don't know, and there aren't clues on the websites to tell you. If you go, you assume it's a VDOT road, so you make an almost natural assumption it'll be a VDOT sidewalk. When you go to the VDOT site to report that, the system doesn't clue you in that maybe it's not. Meanwhile, the county has an excellent map, but nothing has said to you, go look at that map. Nothing on the VDOT map site says, go look at the county map. Now you make your complaint to VDOT, you don't know you've complained to the wrong agency and you don't hear for weeks. So you start complaining and eventually you get an email that says it's not under our jurisdiction, or you phone them and they say it's not ours. So there could be a lot better helps in terms of our ability to report. We're so dependent on reporting, and yet it's not a unified system. On the other hand, when you call the county, it's actually, while the county has great information about jurisdiction and stuff like that, it's actually incredibly difficult to make a complaint about an issue. And I've been struggling, with some very minor issues, just trying to bring them to the right agency's attention. And I'm very familiar with how all this works. So it's inordinately difficult to deal with very small maintenance issues, which we're very, very dependent on. We are on our sidewalks right next to, often with no buffers from fast-moving traffic. So we are uniquely dependent on maintenance. So sorry, it was a long statement, but I would love to know more about if there are any plans to unify the system to help the public and to make it more coherent and effective.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts, Renula. And yes, the plan will make recommendations in regards to maintenance. And I like some of the ideas you mentioned that we haven't discussed yet internally. So that's really great to hear that feedback of what we can do better, coordinating with VDOT, sharing that information, but also, look at the bigger picture of having this hodgepodge situation of different agencies maintaining different parts of the sidewalk network, and some sidewalks actually having no assigned maintenance agency attached to it, which is also a problem. And one of the prominent examples in this district is the sidewalk along Reston Parkway that does not have an assigned maintenance responsibility. And you can tell. So thank you for bringing up that issue, and it will surely be a topic that the plan will look into and make recommendations on how to improve.
Yeah, and can I just throw in there Wheelie as being another example, because now that does have maintenance, but it switches between agencies, and it's another example of a sidewalk that it's acting as a two-way walking and biking facility with no buffer right against fast-moving traffic. So it's really, we're very dependent on good maintenance.
Thank you. All right, we have a couple other hands up, and I think Lauren had some technology issue and had to drop off, so I'm going to call on let's see, Larry Butler. Okay, I'm not sure if I can unmute. There we go.
Hello, thanks Nicole. Thanks for hosting tonight. And I want to echo a little bit of what Enola said about the maintenance issue. And Fairfax County has an online version of who's responsible for what. And while it is not perfect, it is a really good resource to determine is it VDOT, is it the county, is it Reston Association, etc. I'm only speaking of Reston, not Vienna. I know this is a 100 mil district meeting. And also our Multimodal Transportation Advisory Committee, and I think Mike Dermott is on this call. We basically put out in our RA News, contact us, and I think we can get people to the right agency on who the maintenance responsibility is. And along those same lines, Reston Association entered into an agreement with Fairfax County, it was about 3 years ago, where we're doing surface maintenance, which is snow plowing on about 1.5 miles of county trails in Reston, primarily to get people to Metro. And, so we did that, and we basically offered that. We're not getting compensated for it, but, it shows our commitment, to the line. And, I think it's really important to acknowledge that the county is doing a lot of pedestrian improvements in Reston. I mean, there's lots of sidewalks going in. There's a long one on South Lakes Drive that's about to commence, where the county has stepped in and is actually doing a missing link that we had identified years ago but never got the funding for. So I think, it's that coordinated effort between the agencies that's really important. And then the last thing I'll say is that it would be helpful if the county could take a stronger role with VDOT, because I find with a lot of pedestrian, whether it's cycling or pedestrian crossings and so forth, the crunch point is with VDOT. It doesn't warrant a crosswalk. And I use the polo fields example and things like that. So, I mean, I just encourage the county to whatever extent they can to take a stronger role with VDOT on behalf of the citizens in whatever district they may be operating. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate the feedback. All right, let's go down the line. John had also a comment. Let me unmute you.
Good evening, Nicole. Good to see you again. And thank you for doing this. I was curious that a couple of configurations that I've experienced in the metropolitan area and in Reston were not included in the sidewalk solutions. One is a sidewalk whose material is not asphalt, brick, pavers, other kinds of material that gives a contrast to the asphalt. It really alerts the drivers that this better than the zebra striping does. We have right outside my window, I can see a pedestrian island that helps keep the people from Shadowwood safe as they cross Soapstone on the way over to the 7-Eleven. We've had multiple fatalities there, so that was a great improvement. But it seems to me, in my experience of going around the metropolitan area, that speed tables that also serve as crosswalks that have a surface that is not asphalt really lets the driver know, hey, this space is different. Pay attention. Deal with this area. It's not just a piece of asphalt that you're going to go flying through. It really does alert the driver. Now, I know the pushback I get from VDOT types is, well, it makes it harder for the snowplow people. But the reality is that if you look at those crosswalks and speed tables with a differentiated surface, after a snowstorm, I think we've had 2 in the last 5 years, they're pretty good at getting cleared. So I would hope that we could, in developing this plan, add speed tables and add different pavement surfaces as 2 of the tools in our toolkit to make crosswalks safer for pedestrians and safer for the driver. I don't know of a driver who's looking to hit a pedestrian. If they get the notice ahead of time, just that change in pavement is cheaper than the hawker light. You came up with a different name for it, but it is less intense technologically to just put in a change in surface. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, those are tools that are in the National Pedestrian Toolbox that we have some experience implementing within VDOT right away. But as you mentioned, the maintenance, long-term maintenance of these type of facilities will need to be, addressed in order to make those new type of facilities a sustainable solution. But it has definitely shown to be an effective solution. So thank you for mentioning that. Okay, we have time for one more. Burton raised his hand. Let me unmute you.
Hey, Nicole. Hi, everybody. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, you can.
I have 4 things that I wanted to talk about. You talked about sidewalks and the standard width being 5 feet. And something that I encounter walking around Reston is it seems like there's a fair amount of runners and sometimes walkers that just choose not to use the sidewalks. They prefer to use the road, either the shoulder or the bike lane. And I'm not sure why that is, but I think that it might have something to do with the width of the sidewalks. It could have something to do with trip hazards in the sidewalks. It could have to do with runners preferring the more soft, smooth feel of asphalt versus concrete. But whatever the case may be, I think that it would be a good idea to figure out what people want to use as pedestrians and design accordingly. So if the current sidewalk standards are not serving people's needs, then let's figure out what they want and build that. And then some things that I don't enjoy about some sidewalks in Reston. It's not really a safety issue, but there's a fair amount of landscaping, overhanging trees and bushes that are encroaching on sidewalks. And when you're walking 2 abreast, as I often am, and especially with COVID, where you're sometimes too abreast and then you're approaching somebody else who's coming the other way, walking a dog. There's no room to pass. There's hardly even room for two people to walk when you're dealing with the landscaping. So I was curious if there's any Fairfax County proactive measures to enforce trimming of shrubs and trees, or if that's just something that's dealt with on a complaint type basis. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then secondly, about crosswalks, I think there seems to be a lack of general understanding in the population, especially about that crosswalk type number 3 that you mentioned, where it's not marked at all. When I try to cross a street at an intersection, but there's no marked crosswalk, it feels more dangerous. And I think the drivers, the way they react to me, it seems that there's an attitude that I'm doing something wrong by crossing the street here. And, you know, it's like they're doing me a favor by stopping instead of they're just doing what they're obligated to do. So I think there's an opportunity there for improving communication in some way countywide on the expectation that, you know, that this is an unmarked crosswalk and what that means. I really think that most people don't understand that this is a crosswalk, even though it's not marked. On that crosswalk issue specifically, a place where I experienced that is on North Shore Drive in Reston, where there's a crossing from Wainwright Drive over to the Fairway apartments. So third, snow plowing. The way roads are plowed in Fairfax County, the plows tend to, especially at the major intersections, they tend to plow all the snow on top of the sidewalks. So, you know, there might be a couple inches of snow that falls over a 24-hour period, but it's plowed onto the sidewalk and you end up with 3 feet of snow that's piled right on top of where a pedestrian would be walking. So it really impacts the walkability at major intersections after snowfall. And then I wish there was a way to fix that. I don't know, you know, who would do that, but it severely impacts walkability. And then fourth, on micromobility, I was curious how you would treat those micromobility devices like electric scooters as active transportation. I can kind of see the case for it either way, but you know, it doesn't require a whole lot of calories, you know, so there's not the health benefit that you get from biking or walking that you get from pushing a button and standing on a platform. On the other hand, you know, I do kind of like the fact that, you know, you're getting around with a 20-pound vehicle versus a 2,000-pound vehicle, but I think you're missing the health. So, so I was just interested that you classified those as active transportation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Burton. So let me just quickly reply to 2 of your questions. So you asked about the tree trimming. So my understanding is that's mostly complaint-based because it's a big county, there are limited resources. So if there's a site distance issue or a pedestrian, you know, passing issue that something's hanging too low, again, the county map that shows who maintains that walkway, either the trail or the sidewalk, that would be the correct agency to contact. However, if you just want to contact Fairfax County or VDOT, we do inform each other. If it's not ours, we let VDOT know, they let us know if something needs to be done. And usually they come out pretty quickly to fix it. Sometimes it's on private property. So then it would be on the, for example, the HOA or the private property owner to remedy the situation. The other issue you mentioned was that I just quickly want to touch on was that electric vehicle being part of that active transportation definition, and that's really a national definition. It's not Fairfax County specific. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. That these type of newer electric vehicles are actually part of this broader active transportation planning, just because they use the same facilities that most often they're in bicycle facilities. So in some states, they're actually starting to think of bicycle facilities as light vehicle facilities. So it's not just for bikes anymore. So there's this whole new thought of, these are really very popular. They're getting a lot more people out. And it's definitely more active than, driving in a car. And it actually does take some effort to kind of stabilize yourself. And so not quite as much, but for e-biking, it has shown that, it's kind of like walking versus running. There's still some benefit, and actually people go further on them on average than on a standard bike, and it gets a whole new group of people interested in it. So in the interest of time, I would like to move on to our next topic.
Thanks a lot, Nicole.
Thank you. And we may have some time at the end if we to go any of the questions. I know. Thank you so much for participating and asking so many questions. And I'm sorry we can't get to everything. And I did see the question in the chat, but it was posted privately to me, so I'm just going to read it. Why are there so few crosswalks in the community? VDOT's rules are so restrictive that even when they know that there is a dangerous intersection, they simply say no to crosswalk, but don't offer anything else as a solution. And that's a good observation. And this plan will provide some policy guidance to VDOT and Fairfax County engineers on the number of crosswalks, type of crosswalks at intersections. This is really not something we have currently in the policy, so that's something we want to address. But let's move on to our next topic, which is bicycle facilities. So bicycle facilities are different from pedestrian facilities, that they come in a lot of different forms. And one of the most basic form is no facility, which is a shared street. And pedestrian can share that street as well, but it's more common for a cyclist to bike on the pavement. Often pedestrians, which still on the picture on the left here, prefer to walk in the gravel, but of course for cyclists it's a little bit harder to do. And those are usually quiet neighborhood streets that have very few cars on them, low speeds, and they're quite comfortable to bike on. Sometimes even for children. So that's the most basic facility for bikes to go on. On the right here, you see it's still a low speed road, but it starts to be a lot less comfortable. It's more narrow. There's a double yellow line. So here, one thing we can do is add shared lane markings, which are also called sharrows. And they indicate where the cyclists should ideally be in the lane, and that drivers should expect cyclists along this road in the lane. And we have bike lanes, which are very common in Fairfax County, and in particular Reston has a lot of them. Vienna has some, and those are just the one solid line with a little bicycle symbol, and it can be either on one side of the road or both sides of the road. And on the right here, there are buffered bike lanes, which is the same thing, except there's a second solid line with a little bit of a hatching to provide a little bit of extra space. And we can add those bike lanes when we retrofit roads with when the road is being paved, and we can add bike lanes and there is enough space. We can add that buffer. Then we have off-street bike facilities, which are a lot more expensive than the on-street facilities. So those are actual, like a sidewalk, a capital project, or a developer has to build these. Those are usually pavement, but they can also be concrete or pavers. And they are wide, much wider than a standard sidewalk to allow, that two-way bike travel, mixing with pedestrians safely, usually 10 feet wide, sometimes wider, sometimes a little bit more narrow, depending on how many pedestrians are expected. So on the left, for example, that's not in Fairfax County, but that's an example of what an urban shared use path could look like. That one is in Indianapolis. On the right, you see our more common paved shared use path along roads or through our many beautiful parks. Then we have a new facility that we are just starting to implement in Fairfax County. So we have a few projects that are underway that would implement something like this, which is basically a bike lane that's off street. So it's designated just for cyclists or these electric micro mobility vehicles. Pedestrians have their own facility, their own space. So cyclists can still go at pretty high speeds, but they're separated from traffic. And that can be either two-way on one side or both. To the left here, or on the right is a one-way facility. And the way we decide, what facility do we want to implement? For pedestrians, it's urban versus suburban, but for cyclists, it's a little bit different. So here we see a little comic strip that shows that, some of the bike facilities we've implemented in the past have served cyclists, but it hasn't really been the ideal facility for most people. So here's the one guy says like, yeah, I can deal with this. This is not that bad. But others say like, look at the bike lane or the shared street and say like, no, this is not for me. However, if you build them a really nice, safe facility, it still serves that cyclists that feel comfortable, but it also serves a lot more people. And here's this graphic shows a little bit how this kind of general thought of who are we serving with these bike facilities and the way we design them. And it's really a small amount of the population that feels comfortable on high traffic, high speed roads, either sharing the road with traffic or riding on bike lanes close to those, close to that traffic. Or, it's a second group of cyclists here is experienced, but they still want a little bit of separation, or they don't feel comfortable in a bike lane or next to high-speed traffic, but they would ride in a bike lane in a more urban area. But the biggest part of the population, over half of the population, and that's not just true for Fairfax County, but it's really nationwide, it's the group we call the interested but concerned. And that's the group that really wants a separation from traffic at all times, based on like a shared use path or a protected bike lane. But if that's not provided, or there are barriers within that facility, like an unsafe crosswalk or a ramp they need to cross, we're really not serving a really big part of the population and don't see high usability of our facilities. So on that note, please let us know, how you experienced riding bikes or scooters or any other small vehicle in Fairfax County. So again, please raise your hand by clicking the button or pressing *3 if you would like to speak, or use the chat if you would like to type your question or answer. Let's start maybe with the chat first. Let's see if we have. Okay, Bruce Wright is asking how many.
Would you like me to help take back over?
Sure. Are you all set on the technology side?
I just need, yes, and also I just need to be the host again.
Okay.
So I can see your questions. Thank you. Sorry, everyone. I think we can go to the hands raised. So I see we have a hand raised from Bruce Wright. I'll unmute you now.
Hi there. Thanks, Nicole, for doing this again. One issue that was raised earlier was maintenance, and it applies to biking as well. Now that we've got a number of bike lanes along Soapstone and Lawyers and many other roads, they're starting to fill up both in the summer, in the winter, throughout the year with debris. And it's my understanding that VDOT, or in some cases I've seen Reston Association, thankfully, out there clearing the bike lanes and the side of the road. VDOT only does it rarely. And so I'd like to make a pitch for the county encouraging VDOT to dedicate funds for bicycle facility maintenance. As it is now, it seems like if there isn't much snow and the budget isn't taken up by snow clearing, that there may be some extra left over for either repaving or maintenance of bike facilities. So I think it needs to be dedicated. And along with that, and it include some of the concerns expressed earlier about vegetation on trails and also encroachment of the grass that's narrowing our trails. And it's especially true on Sunrise Valley Drive from Wheelie to the WNOD trail. People don't use that trail in part because it's so narrow because of the encroachment of vegetation. And one possible, sorry for the phone ringing, but one possible way to address that would be for VDOT to have a dedicated trail or bicycle facility maintenance person or a trail maintenance person. One reason the WNOD trail is such a treasure is that they have a team, they have an overseer that has a team of maintenance folks that go out there and make sure, periodically they repave, that they clear vegetation, and they look at improvements, safety improvements along the trail. And so I think that would go a long way, and that takes money, and the county, can impress upon VDOT the importance of doing that. And then us as advocates can encourage VDOT to dedicate funds for that. I've got others, but I'll stop there.
Thank you, Bruce.
Mhm.
All right, let's look at the
So we
chat.
also have a question, of how many participants are at the meeting. Right now we have 10, but I think just to note that we are primarily advertising for the survey associated with this effort. So that's possibly a reason for our lower attendance at these meetings. Our main goal is to direct people to the survey, and we are enjoying also having this community conversation. And then we have another comment from Burton. The problem I feel with Sharrows is that whenever they aren't present, drivers may have the attitude that cyclists shouldn't be on the road. And then I think I also have a raised hand from Burton, so we'll go to you next.
Hello again. Yeah, I definitely agree with that graphic that you had on the spectrum of cyclists. And I've, this last year, trying to socially distance, I've stayed off more of the WNOD. I'm trying to give that space to the strollers and the dog walkers. And I've been riding more on roads. Yeah, I put my comment there on the Sharrows in the chat. Yeah, so just to expand on that a little bit, I ride on New Dominion Parkway a fair amount, and it's no problem going downhill on New Dominion, but going uphill, there's more of a conflict. And, as a cyclist, you can zigzag through Reston Town Center, you can hop on the sidewalk, but then you're dealing with pedestrians and dogs. It would be nice to have a Sharrow, I guess, on New Dominion going uphill, or a bike lane. And I'm still conflicted about that because I feel like the proliferation of Sharrows it signals to drivers that cyclists belong in this spot. But then it's like, if you're a driver and you see that, okay, cyclists belong here, then any place that there's not a Sharrow, that means cyclists do not belong here. I can't tell you how many times I've had drivers behave aggressively toward me and aggressively point to the sidewalk that's next to the road, to indicate that I should be on the sidewalk when I'm cycling, trying to get as high as trying to go as fast as I can, which is greater than 15 miles an hour and less than 20 miles an hour. Not fast enough for the drivers on the road. You know, and I don't really want to try to slow anyone down, but this is a shared road and I have a right to be there, but they don't understand that. And so there's a conflict and I feel threatened regularly. And it's, you know, it's pretty uncomfortable. I agree with what Bruce said about maintenance in general. And on the Fairfax County Parkway Trail, as you're crossing over the toll road and areas around there, there's quite a lot of sand and other debris that accumulates. You know, and the reason this amount of debris is there is because of the plowing operations. If there was no plowing, there wouldn't be that much debris. But the plows come through and they take every bit of debris that was accumulated over the past year, and it all gets picked up with the sand and with the snow, and it gets pushed off to the side onto the trail. So I feel like there should be something done after that has happened to clear the trail. And I did appreciate that. I guess it was the county that cleared that trail at some point this winter, but they did it by sweeping. So they swept the sand and debris to the sides, but the debris is still captured by the curbs on both sides. Like as you cross over the toll road, there's curbs on both sides, so that prevents the debris from going anywhere. It can't go off the side. So it just gets pushed to the side, and then it's just waiting for a heavy rain to bring it back into the middle of the trail. And the sand and debris, you know, it often holds little bits of glass that are hazardous. So another thing, just on the Fairfax County Parkway Trail, is south of Sunrise Valley Drive. There's some water pipes that are leaking. They're seeping water. So there's, during the winter, there's water seeping across the trail, and it routinely freezes. And so you have patches of ice forming on the trail between Sunrise Valley and, I don't know, Pinecrest. So sorry to take up so much time, but like just on Sunset Hills Road, that's another one that I use a fair amount. And just on the topic of the spectrum of cyclists, in the area of Sunset Hills Road that's near the new development near Reston Town Center, the trail, there's a trail there, but it doesn't feel to me like it's really optimized for cycling. So I prefer to ride on the road in that point. But then there's other cyclists who would prefer to ride on the trail. And I just hope with the bike facilities that are planned that it does accommodate all of the spectrum of riders, and that there continues to be an expectation. Well, what I would like to be is there should be an expectation that the road space belongs to everyone, and a car might be there, but a bike has a right to be there, even if a bike also has a right to a separate facility that's shared with, you know, elementary school children and dog walkers. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Burton. Right, in the interest of time, let's hear from some more folks. Maybe Mark, since we haven't heard from you yet. Let me see if I can. Lauren, can you unmute Mark?
I'm trying. I don't know why
Yeah,
it
I
won't
can't
let me.
do that.
There we
Ah,
go.
there we go.
Mark,
Thank
you're
you.
unmuted now.
Mark Malcolm. I am a resident of Reston, Polo Fields area. Several of the comments have been made very directly. One, it's hard to ride on a sidewalk when there's overhanging stuff. Second, the maintenance of a number of what are walkway or cycleways, for example, what is McLaren Road between West Ox Road heading towards Centerville Road is an example. What was mentioned by the last speaker, the water pipes are freezing over. That's between Fox Mill. There's a portion between Fox Mill Road and Sunrise Valley where that occurs. Pinecrest is a different direction, but yes, it freezes. Also along the Fairfax County Trail right now is at the intersection with Eldon and Barron Cameron. Fairfax County Trail is blocked. It's the only side is to ride on the east side, and it's been blocked for about 6-7 weeks before a construction project that is not associated with the road, that type of thing. They blocked it. The purpose of my speaking is to ask, in development of new cycle tracks and such, my concern is I ride Sunrise Valley quite a bit, Fairfax County Trail and regions, and right now Sunrise Valley is without sharrows, without the cycle track, and that's been going on now for a number of years. And it's really about 4 projects, I think, that are all coming together. What's the time frame where we'll actually understand how that roadway will be impacted by the development of having a multimodal capability? If there's a timeline that y'all are working toward right now, I understand it's not too far into the future. Families mentioned that, and I appreciate that. I won't be able to be with the HM Tech meeting on the 26th, but looking forward to understanding when.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, and you're right that the county is working on a cycle track project along Sunrise Valley Drive from the Resin Town Center Metro to the Innovation Station Metro. So it's a pretty significant project, the first of its kind. So we have to do our due diligence when it comes to designing this facility. So we are in close coordination with VDOT, ironing out some of the design details because it does affect every single intersection along the corridor. So I didn't introduce intersections for cyclists earlier, the protected intersections that have, make the bridging the barriers really safe for all ages and abilities. That some of our facilities that are pretty safe, but then you have this crossing that doesn't quite feel safe, like a buffered bike lane that all of a sudden you have to kind of merge with traffic, for example. So a protected intersection would fully protect the cyclists on the cycle track, and we are working on it, and the timeline is not quite clear yet, but within the next 3 years is probably a reasonable assumption. So once this project moves from the early stages in design to our traffic engineers, the designers that will work on implementing the project, we can provide a timeline, and that should happen this year. So then we know more. And to Burton's point, we are planning similar facilities on New Dominion as well. So no bike lane, no share, but a cycle track, as well as Town Center Parkway. Those are the 3 roads in this district that will receive this new innovative treatment. But we are working within the VDOT right away. So before this is really making it into the VDOT road design manual. So they're open to it, and we're working with them, but it does take a minute longer than a regular project that we have already implemented. So I know we have a lot of interest and questions, but in the interest of time, I would like to move on to the next topic, but there will be time at the end to further talk about bicycle issues. But I want to get to the project too. All right, so let's move on to hiking, mountain biking, and equestrian facilities. Part of the active transportation is also some of those more recreational ways of transporting yourself, and that's part of the national definition. So this includes, for example, riding a horse or hiking through the forest. So we have wonderful facilities in Fairfax County to get out in nature and be on a non-paved surface, or ride your horse in some really nice horse trail areas, as well as we have really great mountain biking facilities, but there is still room for improvement. And as part of this plan, we have the opportunity to plan new hiking trails, new mountain biking areas, new mountain biking trails, and new equestrian trails. So I'm not sure if anyone here would like to speak about that part of active transportation. I know we have a very vocal constituency for this, so I want to make sure I give you the floor to have a conversation about unpaved facilities as well. And please take your hand down if you still have it up from the bicycle conversation.
So we just switched back to chat and I see some hands. So we'll go to Larry Butler first.
All right, thank you. Yeah, as a hiker and mountain biker, as well as a road biker, the county has great assets for that. A frequenter of Lake Fairfax, I went for the first time down, I guess it was last fall, down to Fountainhead, and actually hiked on the Brat Trail. I was amazed that I'd never been down there in the 50 plus years I've lived in the county. I think a key element there is getting the word out, because mountain bikers can be abusive when the trails are wet and so forth, as well as the equestrians. So I think education about, hey, the trails are closed. I know Fountainhead, which is a regional park, Nova Parks, but I think I think at Lake Fairfax and Wakefield and other places like that that are run by the county, it's getting that education out about, hey, the trails are wet, don't go out, because it ruins it for everybody. So just a little bit on the education piece there would be helpful, but great assets.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks. And now we'll go back to Bruce Wright.
Yeah, just a quick question. Do you know if there's any thoughts about improving the cross-county trail from Lawyers Road south down to, I guess it's the Oakmar Rec Center? I've ridden it once. I know bikers love it. And so there's always the conflict between wanting a single track versus something that other cyclists can use. But it's pretty unrideable for anyone other than with a mountain bike. So just wondering if that's part of the plan to potentially improve that. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a really great question. So the cross-county trail is managed by the Park Authority, the Fairfax County Park Authority. So we are working closely with the Park Authority on any trail that's on our plan, and we'll need to make a case-by-case determination based on their knowledge of their community that uses the trails, which segments of currently unpaved trails should remain unpaved, and which ones should be upgraded. I think that particular section, currently the desire is to keep it unpaved. There's a pretty big constituency for having that hiking experience and mountain biking experience, but we will further explore, maybe that could be two parallel trails, or there are different options of serving both users, and still preserve that experience. Some areas as part of the trail, particularly north of the Hunter Mill district in the Drainsville district, those are so the terrain is so difficult that it's probably not going to be paved ever. But other sections could be paved if the community so desires. So that's still to be determined. But thank you for that comment.
Related to that, I would like to make a pitch for changing some of the fair weather crossings to bridges, because those are particularly bad for cyclists. I've one of the few places I've fallen is on the algae on the bottom of those, and they're difficult for us to navigate.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks.
And now we're going to go to Burton.
Hello again. I'm a big fan, big user of the Fairfax County cross county trail between Reston and Great Falls. But I do have the impression when I'm using it that it's basically low value land, you know, that couldn't be used for any other reason. It's basically, you feel and you observe that you're going along a sewer line. You know, it could be a good site for a field trip for students who are learning about sewers, really. But I appreciate it. You know, if the county is able to allocate some higher value, higher elevation land, then I think that that hiking opportunities would be more available during wet weather. So, you know, it's, yeah, the avoiding trails after wet weather makes sense, but then it's also like, well, where are the trails? If you're putting trails right along the stream bed, then certainly they're going to be very soggy after wet weather. I think that Lake Fairfax Park is a fantastic resource, but it's not really that accessible to a large population of Reston that is already on foot and bike. You know, the connection to it is not obvious. It's not marked. You know, you can get to it from around the ice rink, but it's not marked. You just kind of have to know where to go. And then where there's a way to get into it from just east of Wheelie from RA Trails, but it's completely unmarked. So I just feel like there's an opportunity to promote that more, which would mean greater use. I mean, I just think that the community could be getting more value out of that with improved access or marking of some sort.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Let's go to John.
Hey, two things. On the cross county trail in the Reston area, those of us who are bird watchers use that trail a great deal, especially for the next month as the warblers come back. And so it gets a lot of use by people who aren't on mountain bikes. And it does, having the trail in that topography is actually useful for people who are bird watching, because that's where the warblers and other birds tend to congregate. So it's helpful to us, but there are lots of washouts on that trail. And having some kind of a program where those washouts or blowouts get cordoned off and allowed to recover, I think is an important thing, because the folks having the mountain bike experience, yeah, anyway, the mountain bikes are helping to create the blowouts or the washouts. The other thing is, and I don't know what the status of this trail is, but I tried a year ago to ride my bike on the Cub Run Trail, and it was an absolute mess. Couldn't do it. Had to get off of it after about a mile because it was so broken up and it was so narrow that it just, I had some friends riding with me, and it was like I was embarrassed. They're from out of the county, and I just wanted to get them an experience that wasn't the WNOD, because it can be so busy. And it was like no one had walked that trail or ridden that trail or used that trail in a decade. I mean, that's how badly it was busted up. And I don't know if the people out in Sully are saying anything to you about that trail, but I was surprised at how the really bad shape that trail was in. Thanks.
Thank you. And we will pass that on to the Sully district as well. You know, I think some sections of that trail will be improved as part of the 66 parallel trail extension. All right, let's move on to the next topic. Thanks again. That was a really great discussion. One topic left to cover is which is kind of like a mix of all of them together, a complete street. Oops, wrong direction. What is a complete street? So yes, streets need places for walking, biking, and driving, but there's also more to a street. A street can also have, you know, street trees and street light and street furniture, like I mentioned earlier, in the urban areas, but it doesn't have to be just in urban areas. It can be outside of urban areas, and it makes a really big difference for pedestrians to have shade and lighting at night, and for cyclists as well. And for drivers, this can actually help slow speeds because it doesn't look like such a car-centric street. There's more enclosure. So you can see the difference just this streetscaping makes in these two images, which is the same street. You can see that yellow truck there. One has, you know, currently there's, I think it looks like a bike lane that pedestrians are also walking on. We have many streets in Fairfax County where we have only a bike lane but no pedestrian facility. And then there's a street. There's some greenery left and right. And there's some street lighting, but it's not really a multimodal environment. And then on the right, you have the same street with protected bike lanes here and a pedestrian space and the trees, and it really changes the setting. And this is really actually a path to school. So you can see the school children there on the right, and what a different type of experience it is, and from a safety perspective, to have this enhanced street environment. And this is what we mean by complete streets. So let's dive into what this project is about. So now that we have kind of talked about where are we in Fairfax County right now, where are the issues for walking, biking, and hiking, and what are our assets, let's look at how did we get here. So we have multiple plans in Fairfax County that have, you know, looked at developing a trail system and where bike lanes should be. So we have the countywide trails plan on the one hand, which was established in the late 1970s. So it has been around for a long time. And some of the oldest trails you see out there are the ones that were implemented in the late 70s and 80s, before we even had trail construction standards. And those feel, you know, kind of like sometimes we call them a crappy sidewalk because they don't even meet a sidewalk standard. But those were what I call our legacy trails, which were the first trails that were implemented as part of this vision of creating this trail network in Fairfax County. And they were meeting the standards at the time. But of course, we have changed those standards and now have to retrofit those trails to make them truly usable by people with you know, mobility issues as well as cyclists. Then we have the Bicycle Master Plan, which was developed more recently in 2014, which focused mostly on street infrastructure for cycling, such as bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, sharrows, and identify those shared streets that make good connections. There are a few shared-use paths and cycle tracks actually on that plan that have a significance for transportation. And then we have something called special area plans, which only focus on the county's activity centers, which there are over 20, and that includes Reston and Tysons and Annandale and Springfield. So some of those more commercial, small urban centers or bigger urban centers that have their own plans for how those roads are supposed to look. They're shown in a different way. So while the trails plan and the bike plan is a map with lines on it, the special area plans have cross sections and show, you know, the type of road and then what type of bicycle and pedestrian facility and street shape should be provided. So as part of this effort, we actually have to map out all these facilities so we can actually overlay them to start to develop a comprehensive network. There's also something called the Regional Trail Network, which is fairly recent. It was established, I think, just 2 or 3 years ago by the Capital Trails Coalition, which is the coalition of the jurisdictions around the DC area, as well as the National Park Service and other park agencies and other interested, you know, community groups. that envision this large-scale trail network that is connected between all these jurisdictions, and it has to be off-street trails. It can include cycle tracks, but it can't include on-street connections. So what you see here in Fairfax is in green our existing trails, and that does include some of our legacy trails, so there's definitely room for improvement. In orange are planned trails. Some of them are funded, some of them are not yet funded. And we're also working as part of this plan to update this network and include trail connections that are not currently in there. But I want to bring this to your attention because it's actually not in our comprehensive plan yet, but it will be part of the comprehensive plan update. So why do we need the update? I kind of hinted at some of the issues. So we have all these different plans, but there are inconsistencies between them because they were developed at different times. They're sometimes propose different type of facilities for the same location. So every time a development comes in, or the county or VDOT would like to implement a project, we have to look at all these three plans, 2 or 3 plans, and decide which is the best facility at the time. But sometimes, you know, that's not very easy, or someone will only look at one plan, but not even consider the other plans. So in order for us to effectively implement the vision for the biking and walking network, we will need to create, you know, one recommendation that is consistent, particularly among the region-wide plan and the area plans. Then we have the issue with outdated facility recommendations. So the trails plan is pretty old, and again doesn't it has very limited recommendations on how to design the trails, but those recommendations are not up to current standards. Then the bicycle plan, even though it has recommendations that are to current standards, the standards are about to change just in a year or two, and we need to change with it. So the recommendation goes from an on-street facility to an off-street facility, depending on how many roads are, how many cars are on the road, for example, or how fast are the cars allowed to go on this road. So previously we looked just at bike lanes, no matter what the road looked like, but now we need to identify, you know, at what point do we need an off-street facility in order to really serve our population well. And then I previously mentioned that we have that our policy guidance on how to design pedestrian facilities, particularly crosswalks, is not comprehensive enough. So in order to make sure that we have the crosswalks that we want in the locations that we want, that we provide some policy guidance in our comprehensive plan to have something to point to when we work with VDOT on implementing projects and enhancing the safety of our transportation corridors. And here's a project schedule. So it's a really large project. It's a big county. It's the first time we are merging 2 big plans. So this will take a little bit of time. So we are currently in phase 1. We broke it in 2 phases, potentially 3 phases. So phase 1, we are nearly finished, and we focus particularly on you know, where are we right now? And this is part of this conversation as well. What are the issues? What facilities do we have? What is in the plans? What's in the policies to take stake? What is our baseline? And based on that, we are developing a vision, goals, and objectives document, as well as a strategic safety program plan. Those are the 2 big outcomes out of phase 1. Then phase 2 is where we start to dive into actual recommendations based on, you know, what is the vision, what are the goals, how do we achieve them? So we need to develop a facility selection toolkit, as I mentioned, depending on the type of road, what is the appropriate facility, and using that toolkit to determine, you know, what is the network recommendation here. And the policy roads in the bicycle master plan are a good example of where the recommendation wasn't made in that plan, but now I'm looking at the facility selection toolkit, we can see, okay, this is this type of road. What is the land use adjacent to it? This is, you know, XYZ is the appropriate recommendation. And we're looking at programmatic recommendations, how do we achieve more use of the facilities, and many of you had really great recommendations on how to encourage more walking and biking and use of the roads, like wayfinding, or promoting our great assets that we have, but also from a safety standpoint, pedestrian safety issues, bicycle safety issues, teach drivers, make drivers aware of the laws that we have on the book that help protect cyclists and pedestrians. So there are many different campaigns that could be done, so that we will get some recommendations as part of this project, but also implementation guidance. So the county has a huge need of implementing walking and biking infrastructure, and helping, looking at a more data-driven approach. Where is the biggest need? Where are the most users expected? Not just focusing on just transit, but really, because we have such great recreational access assets as well, and to make sure that we help prioritize those as well. Looking at equity, where's our population that needs to get around walking and biking and taking the bus, making sure it's safe to do so. So taking a look at how to best use the funding that we have available to get the biggest bang from a buck, and then work from there, because the need is so large. It will probably take 100 years to implement every single project that we would like to do. And then just to mention the time frame of this project. So again, we're at the end of phase 1, which started last July, and we're ending this summer, the first phase, and then we hopefully dive right into phase 2, which will take probably another year, maybe a year and a half. So now we would like to hear from you again about, what's your vision for walking and biking and hiking in Fairfax. You have already mentioned some, but maybe you can think of some more. Like if you were in charge, what would you change? What would you do? How would you invest the funding that we have? What is important to you to change or to strive for in Fairfax County? Again, type your answer in the Q&A or the chat. And if you would like to speak, please raise your hand.
I'm just going to say we have a comment from Burton that I saw and loved your map that graphed equity versus demand in the county, was wanting to have a version that showed Reston specifically. And then I also have comments from Mark. He says, greatly concur that trail markings are needed from RA/Reston area trails into Lake Fairfax. And quote, complete street trees are an FCDOT as a developer issue. Example, failure to program/fund within Herndon TSA, specifically Monroe Street project last year between Fox Mill Road and Sunrise Valley Drive. Streetscape changed from wooded on east side of Monroe Street to totally open grassed with safety and drainage culvert when a Ham Sam's 8-foot asphalt walkway was installed. It's a highly used walkway. And then I think we'll take the raised hands. Will go to Vanilla Quinn first.
Hi, thanks for this chance. I wanted to sort of, for my final comment, say, we're a very unique situation compared to many communities because we're a suburban county with suburban roads that we basically don't own. So a lot of the design guidance, a lot of the information that's out there doesn't apply well to us. And our problems are all rooted very specifically in the issues to do with being a suburban county where we're trying to get around with incredibly wide streets, ramps from highways that we have to cross that are incredibly difficult and dangerous for people on foot and bike to cross. The fact that we sort of move between networks when we're on bike. We use roads, trails, sidewalks. Thus we really need wayfinding more than in many other places. you know, the unique aspects of being a suburban community that's actually trying to become a walking and biking place. And the real issues for us and the real dangers are on all those very specific suburban issues layered onto the fact that we don't own our roads, and really a focus on those things, because those are all the things that are really causing us the problems, I think. I mean, it's easy to bike from A to B. It's what do you do when you've got right on red with the big turning radius along your route from A to B?
Thank you for sharing that.
I'm going to go to Mike.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. This is Mike McDermott. Larry mentioned that I was on, I'm the chair of the Multimodal Transportation Advisory Committee out of Reston. And I just wanted to mention one of the things we're trying to do this year is create a feedback for the Rest on Foot and Bike or RoFab process that's been going on for well over 30 years. But we'd like to make the feedback a much more immediate process than every few years. So I just wanted to mention that to the folks on the call. I know, recognize the names of many of them, so they're probably already aware to some extent. But one of the things that we're going to try to do is see if we can make recommendations more immediate and then get it into the county as well as VDOT. And so this would underscore comments that Fiola has made and others, that if there can be a streamlined way of getting information into the county and VDOT that is, so you don't have to go through as many hoops, I think that would help us be effective in getting comments into the right place in a shortest amount of time. So just wanted to bring that up. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for mentioning the Reston walk and bike plan. Yeah, we would love to have the most recent version, or even if it's a draft, as part of this project, because we do have a lot of information in there that's hyper local. It points out a lot of issues and the vision for Reston from a walking biking perspective. So if you wouldn't mind sending that to me, I can pass it on to the consultant for consideration. Oh,
Thanks, and I'm going to go to John now.
I would hope that this conversation gets a little bit more clear for the average citizen. Active travel, as I listen to your presentation tonight, sounds like it means anything that doesn't involve an automobile, because we're including electric bikes, electric scooters. So it's basically, this is how we transport people who aren't using an automobile. And I think that needs to be more clearly stated. It's not obvious that's what this plan is about. And I also think we need to be more clear in the comprehensive plan that when we draw a line on a road, we're going to actively consider taking away travel lanes. The comprehensive plan doesn't say that now. And so when travel lanes are taken away on Lawyers and Soapstone and South Lakes, you couldn't go into the comprehensive plan and find that. And I think it's an equity issue. 80% of people getting around are getting around in an automobile. 5% of people are using a bike, including me. I did 20 miles this weekend and 20 miles the weekend before. And if you can imagine the reaction that human beings would have if you said South Lakes High School will now only be accessible in any way, shape, or form to 5% of the people who live in Reston, I think you can imagine what the reaction would be. And so I think we've been disingenuous in the way we've presented the issue. And then it causes problems like the center left turn lane on Soapstone. If I'm traveling in one direction and trying to make the left into my court, and somebody's trying to make the left into Castle Rock, we're going to play chicken. And that's dangerous. And that's true whether I'm on my bike trying to make the left into Under Oak or if I'm in my car. The stacking of cars at the intersection of steeplechase and lawyers. Because it's only one lane now, the cohort, that group of cars that are opposing me, now is so long I can't get through that intersection on a green light. I can't make the left. So what do? Well, now I'm going to drive over on Triple Crown, and I'm sure the people on Triple Crown love to see the cut-through traffic, because then I can get on the steeplechase and make the crossing on a green light while the red light is changed. Similarly, on South Lakes, the implementation of the bike lanes on South Lakes is a disaster. There have already been 5 accidents at Ridge Heights, where you go from 2 lanes down to 1 lane. And the transitions for the left turns and the accel and decel on the side streets off of South are far too short. And they're confusing for the drivers when I'm driving on that, and it's confusing for the bicyclist when I'm biking on that street. I think, bicycling is a wonderful activity. I engage in it. It's very healthy. But at the end of the day, I have to acknowledge I'm only 5% when I'm on my bike. And the interest of the 80% of the people who aren't on their bike at that moment, I think has to predominate. And we have to first, if we're going to be putting bicycle lanes on roadways, we have to give the majority of the population the preferential treatment, not the minority. And when I'm on my bike, I'm in a minority. And I think in a democratic society, we cannot be taking half of our streets and saying only 5% of the population can use half of our street. That's anti-democratic. And I think that this whole exercise needs to avoid the anti-democratic result, never mind the safety concerns that I've already discussed. So I think we need to be a lot more careful with this and a lot more honest. If we have if we put a line down a street, are we saying we're going to get rid of a through lane in order to accommodate that bike? Because you look at the comp plan today, you wouldn't know that just looking at the comp plan. So a little more openness, a little more honesty, I think would do everybody a lot of good. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, John. Let's go to, I think we have Gretchen, who has not spoken yet. Let's hear from Gretchen.
Okay. Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I live off of Glade over in the Deepwood area. And we have a lot of active travel with our neighborhood is split between Glade, Deepwood is. There's the north and south side. We have the pool on the south side. We have tennis courts and everything else on the north side. And everybody is using the crosswalk that is at Charter House and Glade. We have been voicing concerns for that crosswalk and trying to figure out ways we could provide a safer crossing there. The speed has increased, the amount of cars have increased, and when cars stop for people in the crosswalk, other cars pass them on the right to whip around them. I think they think they're just turning left or something, they'll whip around them. We've had a lot of near misses. And, you know, when you're talking about the vision and being able to walk and bike, the kids are going to be biking to the pool. We've had the Reston station has been trying to do some traffic calming for the area. We have tried to see about if we could get the rapid flashing beacons there, because they're, if you go look at that location of Charter House and Glade, on both sides, it's kind of a hill coming up. So the people speed up coming up the hill both ways. And people have been stuck in the middle of the crosswalk. So I really would love to see something that we could look into for that location, for safer walking for the pedestrians, the cyclists, and people using that crosswalk.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And when I introduced Lauren, I failed to mention that she's our pedestrian program manager. So Lauren has been looking at the crosswalk and how to increase safety So Lauren, would you like to say a word about your efforts there?
Sure, and we did talk with Supervisor Alcorn's office today, with Shamley's on the call as well, about that crosswalk. And it's enlightening to me that there's issues with passing on the right. I wasn't aware of that, and I think that's really helpful and insightful to what's going on. I think it's really challenging when we have speeding issues because, again, we're dealing within this framework of the VDOT, guidelines, I guess I would say, as to how to address these types of things. But speeding isn't really always captured in the framework because we look at speed limit. So that's really insightful, and I think we'll take that back and be able to discuss on that one further. So thanks, Gretchen. I'm going to go to Larry now.
All right, thank you. My last few comments here. First and foremost, I think a lot of people here have highlighted the fact that, the fundamental problem, it seems, is VDOT. And Fairfax County has to deal with VDOT regs, as does the public. And to the extent that a larger conversation about what is important to Fairfax County with respect to the roads that are owned by VDOT and what the citizens want with respect to those roads, I mean, I know that's a much higher level conversation, but I think there's got to be some push there, because we hear at every transportation meeting, we hear about what the county would like to implement, what the citizens would like to implement. The roadblock, no pun intended, is VDOT. And so I think that's something that, maybe Supervisor Alcorn can take up. It's definitely a higher level thing. But the other thing I wanted to go back to was a much earlier comment by Bruce Wright about maintenance. That is really key. We have a lot of facilities that would be used more where they maintain better. One of the examples I use, having biked on lawyers for many, many years, and it's a little bit of a conundrum. You put bike lanes in on lawyers, and when it was 2 lanes in traffic going each way, there was no debris on the road because the cars would blow it off, leaves, sticks, or whatever, gravel. Now you have a bike lane that the cars don't travel in, thankfully, but it doesn't get cleared off. And so, the aspect of maintenance, I mean, when the county is working with VDOT to put in bike lanes and other facilities like that, I think there's I don't want to call it a requirement, but it seems like a responsibility to at least increase the maintenance of those facilities so that they are in fact usable. Because, I agree that there are times when, going down Soapstone or Lawyers, there's so much debris in the road, you don't want to ride on it. And so you're almost forced back out into the traffic, which is the way that it was before the lanes were put in. So just a pitch about the maintenance aspect and, greater coordination with VDOT to achieve the common goals that I think we all have.
Thank you, Larry. That's a really great point. And we, for the first time this year, when we asked VDOT if they could sweep the bike lanes, usually the answer is no. This time they said, yeah, we can share the list of the bike lanes with the contractor and ask them to prioritize it. So that's a really positive step in the right direction. Unfortunately, it only applies to bike lanes, not to trails. So that's for continuing coordination to resolve. But it's really great to hear that this topic is really on top of mind, and it was often seen as more of a cosmetic problem, but it really seems to be perceived as more of a making a facility usable and welcoming and safe to use.
Thanks.
Right,
I'm going to go ahead and read a few of the chat comments. So Burton says, read terminology. I do agree that wording clarity could be improved. I wasn't sure whether transportation included going out for exercise, but not to get to a particular destination. Do you want to address that, Nicole?
Sure, and that's something we struggle with in the profession. So the federal highway Department of Transportation actually does include recreational trips as part of their definition of transportation. So we are trying to be in line with, you know, how the rest of this country, you know, what type of verbiage they're using to describe. But it is a little bit misleading or confusing to use transportation for both recreational and utilitarian trips. And sometimes trips are both, you know, even as long as you move from A to B in space, you're transporting yourself. So we are trying to show through our branding and the explanations that we provide in the survey, for example, to be very specific, you know, about this is what we mean by active transportation. These are the type of modes that make up the active transportation universe. And these are the many ways you can be participating in active transportation. So if you look at our community survey, it starts out asking basically these questions as also an educational matter of like, oh, you know, these type of things are part of active transportation. But yeah, we struggle with that. Just like other terms like Vision Zero is one of those other terms that needs a lot of definition and can be confusing from time to time. So we're working in any suggestions are definitely welcome on how to improve.
Great. So it says, he also says it sounds like a pedestrian refuge / bump out would be nice at Charterhouse and Glade. And yes, that's sort of what we've discussed, although we don't have funding for that at this point. So we're going to continue to work on that. And then the next question is from Burton also, does VDOT plow the bike lane portion at Lawyers? The bike lane
Yes,
portion of
should.
Lawyers.
Yeah, so bike lanes should be plowed. I'm not positive about shoulders, but I do believe shoulders are plowed as well. Usually they plow, you know, edge of pavement to edge of pavement, but sometimes it's unclear under this layer of snow where that edge is, if there's no indication. But usually that's a benefit. It's considered a benefit of bike lanes that they're actually plowed, while currently our off-street infrastructure is not plowed. And Burton also asked if you can speak for a minute or two about the vision. I think we can do that, but then we do need to move on to just cover some of the last slides. I know we're already over time and I don't want to keep you all too long, but at the end we can open it up again for further discussion for anyone that wants to stay on and speak.
Hey, hello again. So I've lived in Reston since 2007, and I've mostly biked as my primary means of transportation since that time. And it's such an unusual thing to be somebody who bikes for transportation in Reston that it kind of default becomes part of your identity. And my vision is that it becomes so normal that it's not part of my identity. You know, that when I say I bike to work, it's just like, okay, so what? Like, that's completely normal. So like I've heard talk about like a 8 to 80 vision, from 8 years old to 80 years old vision. And that's my vision, is that bicycling and walking become so normal in Fairfax County that it's not even something that is interesting to talk about anymore. That it becomes a completely boring topic. I like to vacation in Europe, and partly because it gives me a break from feeling like I'm a persecuted minority here in the United States, where, you know, where in Europe, it's no big deal to walk down the street and see an 80-year-old woman in a dress and heels biking wherever they're going. So that's my vision. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Burton, and thank you for bringing up the 8 to 80 kind of age range. And that's really where we were trying to be. I think with the 2014 plan, it does mention that age range. But what we are as a county and also as a nation actually striving for right now is all ages and abilities. So not starting at 8, but why not start at 0? Why not make it comfortable enough for you know, the mom or dad with a baby on the bike. I guess the safe age is 1 year for for them to withstand just being on a bike and they're fine. So even having toddlers and 5-year-olds, my 5 and 6-year-old have been riding bikes for 3 years now, and it is nerve-wracking for that age group. They're not able to go in a straight line like an 8-year-old would do that. So we're trying to strive further. Thank you for clarifying that. That also is a shift in standard, and yeah, that's what we're aspiring to do with this plan. All right, so let's go through the last couple of slides, and then we can continue the discussion. So I wanted to just restate the priorities of this plan is that we are planning to develop this connected and comfortable network of sidewalks, bikeways, and trails that serve all people of all ages and abilities, help engineers design safer pedestrian facilities such as enhanced crossings, encourage completing streets with trees and lighting. And I know it's a lot harder in reality than it is on paper, and that was brought up earlier in the chat that it's on paper, but once we factor in utilities and whatnot, it becomes really complicated. But it's something we really want to focus on, and it's so important, particularly in the urban areas, to get this right. Then we want to recommend changes to laws that could help make walking and biking safer and more comfortable. Not everything is perfect in Virginia. It's not the most bike and pet friendly state when it comes to the laws. It has been improving. The Fairfax County has a legislative agenda. We do go to Richmond every year to ask for changes. Having this as part of the plan will help us strategize which issues we should tackle first, and then have something to go ready with some the needed references to best practices and studies that we can just pull from working every year with our political stakeholders. Recommend programs and initiatives, as I mentioned, as well as prioritize improvements. So right now we are in the public engagement phase of this project, which is really, it's more like listening, like tell us all you wanted to ever tell us about active transportation, the barriers, where are you going, what would you like to see different, or what is your vision for the future? And there are a few ways the community can share that information with us. So the community survey is really one of the best ways to provide that information. It's available on our website. It's available in 8 different languages. It takes about 14 minutes to complete. So please, if you have not completed the survey, please take the time to answer the questions, because those will really form the foundation of our vision and goals and objectives, and eventually the recommendations that will come out of this effort. If you would like to work with maps and show us in a geographic manner where issues are, so a few issues were mentioned already verbally, but if you would like to take a look at this interactive map on that website, that you can zoom into your neighborhood and drop down the point and explain what the issue is. You can upload pictures. If somebody has already mentioned the issue, you can basically agree or like that issue. Or if you want to tell us where you would like to walk and bike to, but maybe you can't currently get there, that's also, you can add that to this map. And then we have a second map that's a little bit more wonky. It shows the current routes that are planned, both on the bicycle master plan and the countywide trails plan, so you can see how they overlap and where there are still gaps in the network. So if you want to build a trail in the future, if it's not in the plan, we can't build it. So if you see there's a connection missing to your neighborhood or to a school or park that is currently not planned for, or you would like to see a different type of facility, you can go to this map and just draw in the facility. And again, you can describe it, upload the picture if you want it as an example. This is what I would like to see. And that is both for on-street bike facilities, off-street trails, both paved and unpaved and complete streets improvement. Like where do you want to see street lighting, for example, which I know is a big issue in Reston particularly. So the next step for this project is the public engagement period will end on May 15th, so you have a little bit more time. And this was just extended. The original deadline was May 1st, but we would like to hear, have more time to hear from you. So May 15th is the new deadline. Then we will develop the vision and goals reflecting the key outcomes for active transportation in Fairfax County, and have a public review of this document hopefully by the end of May, so you can take a look and see what draft vision and goals we have been developing, and provide your feedback. And then we will take that feedback, develop a final version that will hopefully be approved by the Board of Supervisors probably in July, and that will conclude phase 1. So this concludes our formal presentation. So I just want to mention the other ways you can get in touch with us. This is the link to our website again. You can email us as well at ActiveFairfax@fairfaxcounty.gov, or send us a letter in the mail to Fairfax County Department of Transportation to the attention of the Active Transportation Program. So we can open it up for discussion. And I know it's running late, but we're happy to stay on to answer your questions for a little bit longer. Oops.
So Burton says, even better, all ages sounds great. And then I have a question from Fernula. What is the policy about new technology? For example, autonomous robot delivery vehicles using the sidewalks?
That's a good question. Do you know the answer to that, Lauren? Has that been addressed?
I don't think we have a policy yet. So I think in the city of Fairfax, they're allowing them. So they have them active, but we don't have anything statewide yet. And so we haven't, created any policy locally. Yeah, so I'm sorry I can't answer that, but I guess we'll be potentially addressing that in the plan. I'm not sure, Nicole.
Yeah, there's some ADA issues that come with these robots, because sometimes they're waiting to cross the street in a curb ramp and will not move out of the way for someone in a wheelchair. So that's an issue that came up with those robots. So it's definitely something that the state legislation needs to look at, and we at the local level need to look at too, that if something innovative is rolled out, that it doesn't, is to the detriment of our most vulnerable, particularly, as well as bicyclists and pedestrians that share the space.
And then from Mark, we have safer pedestrian facilities adjacent VDOT roadways need VDOT to cease placing their massive street interchange control boxes immediately adjacent to roadways at intersections, thereby blocking appropriate width sidewalks and possibilities of bikeways. Multiple examples throughout Reston with recent construction in the TSAs. VDOT must be a partner and willing to coordinate participation in the Fairfax County planning process, more so than in the past. And Burton says, I'm delighted that Fairfax County has this effort going. I feel like the county staff is well qualified to serve the community well. Thanks for your time tonight, and thank you, Burton. I'm going to take it to the raised hand. So I think we've heard from many of you guys recently. So I'm going to go to Bruce. We haven't heard from him last time.
Yeah, thanks. Just a parting word. Thanks for all the outreach that you've done. With meetings in every district, and I know and other lunch and learn meetings and so on. Your month is full, and so I think the public has had plenty of opportunity to weigh in. And just wanted to briefly address some concerns that were expressed earlier. We heard similar concerns when the Lawyers Road project was proposed, and Soapstone and others, and South Lakes, and they haven't come true. In fact, safety has been improved by a considerable amount, 70% fewer crashes on Lawyers and Soapstone after these projects were implemented. And I live on these roads or adjacent to these roads, and travel them all the time, and they work just fine. There may be a small incremental amount of delay, but these projects help everybody. They help the drivers, they help the cyclists. So really appreciate what you all are doing. I do want to reinforce the idea that more wayfinding signage will help us to kind of navigate through some of our ways of getting around. One in particular is along Barron Cameron, where there's one little missing gap of trail, but there is an on-road detour. And when the Route 7 trails become available in the next couple of years, people are going to want to get to those locations. And so having good wayfinding signage will help us all. So thanks again. I appreciate the effort and the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Bruce. And thank you for covering the topic of the road diet. So that's actually something that is in our comprehensive plan in the policy section. It recommends that the county screens all roads in Fairfax County for the potential to implement a road diet. It can only be done on roads that don't need 4 lanes or 6 lanes, depending on the type of road diet. And VDOT is, of course, very conservative in the approach and only allows it on roads where no negative impact to drivers is to be expected based on the data. But in the case of the high school, the data didn't show us the type of arrival and departure the school is experiencing every day. And we actually, checked it out and agreed with the community that it needs 4 lanes here. Otherwise, the road would be completely blocked for 20 minutes a day, which was not something that is desirable, of course, on an important road like that. So we did make the compromise to have the detour there and have it signed. And it's a continuing bike lane that cyclists can use. That's not much further. So it's something we do routinely now. Supported by our comprehensive plan and also supported by just best practices. So road diets are a great way to improve pedestrian safety, particularly making the crossing distances shorter and are recommended by the federal highway department as one of those proven countermeasures to road fatalities. So thank you, Bruce, for bringing that up. All right, we have time for 2 or 3 more.
Sure. So we'll go to Mike.
Maybe I forgot to take my hand down. Sorry, I don't have a question.
No problem. How about Fanula?
Yeah, I just want to go back to my question about the autonomous robots. I'm sort of a little surprised it's not being addressed because they are, a real issue in the other thing that's going to be using our sidewalks and that's already here and that we have to compete with. So even if we're not going to have a policy or something like that, I would hope that this project would be a place to make some statements that could be, useful for the future. I mean, in the way they're being implemented right now, people are having to defer to them, and the issue that of the ADA ramps and stuff like that. So I would think a place like this is a good place to put a line in the sand about some of how they work.
Thank you, Finola. That's a really great point. Mm-hmm.
All right. I don't think we have any other hands. I see some more chats, so let me read those and then I'll wait and see if we have any more hands that get raised. So we have Burton says autonomous robots should have to yield to people. And Mark says Pennsylvania state law allows the autonomous robots on sidewalks, practically no restrictions. And still no more raised hands. So if that is all, pass back to Nicole to close.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful discussion. Thank you for all the really detailed feedback, very interesting thoughts. Things we need to worry about in 2021, robots that we need to share our sidewalks with, who knew. So there are lots of things to consider. So I'm really grateful for your insights, and they hyper-local feedback that will really help us improve the quality of the plan. And also, I think Supervisor Alcorn is still on, so I want to give him a chance for some closing words, if you would like to speak, Supervisor Alcorn.
Yeah, actually, this was wonderful. Thank you, Nicole and Lauren, for doing a great job keeping everybody involved, and excellent comments, and looking forward to the principles and goals coming to the Board of Supervisors soon.
Thank you, Supervisor. All right, on that note, have a good night. Thank you again for your participation. It's really appreciated. And we will be hopefully in touch again, and learn more about your thoughts about the vision and goals and objectives when they're publicly available in a few weeks. Thanks again.